Welcome to What Kind of Asian Are You? A podcast featuring conversations about being Asian. We are going to highlight, amplify, and validate Asian voices through deep conversations with those in the diaspora making a difference and being their best selves. I'm your host, Kyle. And welcome to another episode of What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. I am your host, Kyle, and today we have Aya on the show. And first off, before I let her say her hellos and stuff, I just want to congratulate her on the launch of her brand new project. It's out. People should check it out, and I'm going to let her talk more about it and kind of sell you, I suppose, the project, but I don't think there needs to be much selling. But again, hi Aya, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be talking with you. Been a while. We set this up, and now we finally get to talk. Really excited to hear your story, your perspective, and just about your project, because your project is really special, and I'm really excited for it. But before we continue, I just wanted the audience to know more about you first, in terms of your story, your background, what you're all about, your passions, and what you're really into, and most importantly, what kind of Asian are you?
Oh, I get that question all the time, but not from other Asians, actually, which is very interesting. But my name is Aya. I am the co-founder and co-editor of No Cilantro Please Magazine. I also own a separate business called Tinydragon Bytes, Bytes. I do web design, SEO, content strategy, digital marketing, all that fun internet stuff. All the confusing web design stuff that nobody ever wants to deal with. I love dealing with it. So that's kind of where my passion sort of lies. And it actually turned in from a side hustle into my full-time business as of June of last year. So that's when I became full-time. We just recently became an LLC as well. So that's super exciting. And then No Cilantro Please, the magazine, just launched on April 1st. So we're super excited to be able to talk about that and everything. About me, let's see. That's like the one thing I didn't prepare for, actually. I was like, what do I talk about myself for? So stuff about me. I am half Asian. I guess I'll start with that. I'm multiracial, multicultural. So I am half Japanese, like literally 50%, thanks to one of those like ancestry DNA type things. It said 50%, and my sister was 49%. I was like, I'm more Asian than you are. And then the other half is a mixture of Northern European, Italian, Irish, actually some French Canadian, I believe. So there's some of that too, which is super interesting. I didn't know any of that. Somewhere it's like Belgium and all those different, European countries kind of like mixed in and like a melting pot of cultures, I guess. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here, super excited to talk about, the magazine and being able to, talk about, just Asian identity and being multiracial and multicultural and what's that all about.
That's great. And we're going to talk definitely about your magazine, since it's very exciting stuff. It just came out like at the time of recording, like no, a few almost 2 weeks. And
Yep.
before we start with like talking about the magazine, I want to like go at it backwards, where we start from the very beginning with your life before you did the magazine, before you kind of got into like web design and all this
Yeah.
internet stuff, because I think a lot of what you did before led up to what you do now. So I want to talk about that. So can you just tell the audience kind of like how was your childhood like? How was growing up where you grew up was like, being like multiracial, multicultural
Mhm.
kind of thing? Was it what we can stereotypically expect in terms of it's a mixed culture kind of identity, mixed culture kid, and mixed like racial kind of family household? Is it what we can expect, or like the cliche or the stereotype, or is entirely different for you?
Honestly, it was a mix, and not just in the sense of, racial identity, but it was just sort of a mix of everything. So we grew up. So I mostly grew up with my mom, and my stepfather came later into the picture, when I was young. So about, I think, 8 years old. I don't know. It was a very long time ago. And so it was my mom, who is Japanese. She came to America when she was 21 or 22. And she wanted a new life. And then she had us three. I'm the baby of the family. Save the best for last, of course. Don't tell my sisters that. But yeah, so my childhood was really kind of a mix growing up. I went to a Catholic school, Catholic private school, and growing up in the household was, I mean, I was the baby of the family, so I got away with a lot of stuff, which was great. And, being able to just really kind of experience it all was very interesting. Um, you know, on the Asian Japanese aspect of it, it was a lot of, we like, rice was a staple in our household. I think that's sort of a staple for any Asian family, which is really great. You know, Pasta was kind of prevalent too, which was really nice because my stepdad is, he was an Irish Catholic, and I forget what else he was, but he was not was he's still alive. He is white. So being able to grow up in that sort of different household, like, we would have rice for breakfast, but we would have it with eggs and roasted seaweed, or nori as we called it in our household. And ramen was, of course, a staple. We love ramen. When I was younger, we used to call it men men, because we just never really were able to pronounce, like, the ra part of it. So it was, that was very common in our household, as well as, like, your typical American sort of, I don't want to say white people food, but you're kind of a typical American, like hamburgers, hot dogs, like mac and cheese. Those are easy for kids to eat, right? So, like, it kind of just works out. But rice was definitely a thing. But in terms of, like, schooling, it was very interesting. My parents both worked very, very hard to be able to create a good life for us kids. There were three of us, and then my two stepsisters at the time. And it was interesting. I went to a private Catholic school, which was very, there were a lot of white people there. And then you have your exchange students. So those were kind of like the two parts of it. I played soccer, I did dance, I did all the things, kept myself busy, had tons of homework and everything. And, being able to, I guess, fit in was it was a little tough, because I was that weird kid who sat in the corner and then also played soccer and did a million things. So I never really got to, like, hang out with my friends a lot of the time, because I had piles of homework, and I wanted to excel when it came to my grades and everything. So it was very interesting. It was definitely an experience. It wasn't all bad, of course. My best friend at the time, his name was Jake. He was also multiracial, which I think sort of brought it full circle for me, and being able to have someone else there who was also multiracial in that sense, and just kind of knowing that I'm not alone. So that really helped the growing up childhood sort of experience in being able to identify as multiracial, or being like, not really having so much as imposter syndrome, I guess you could say. That was definitely something I did experience at times, where it's like either you don't fit in with the white kids, right? Or you don't fit in with the Asians because you're not fully Asian. So it was kind of just like, okay, where do I fit in, right? But being able to have my best friend Jake there, it was kind of comforting in that sense where it was like, oh, cool. Like, you also are two or more races. Like, this is so awesome. It's like, give me a hug, which is really great. So, yeah, so childhood was very interesting. It was sort of like a mix of everything. The American aspect of it, like the white aspect of it. You know, and as well as like the Asian aspect. I guess a lot of the more stereotypical sort of things that you would see in Asian American households.
It's really interesting how you mentioned those things. The first thing is just you talk about how having that friend, that best friend Jake, who's also multiracial and can like relate to you and like make you feel less alone, or just being able to accept who you are in terms of your Asian American identity, despite
Mhm.
like, oh, everyone else around you was like the mainstream white society. I think it really speaks to how important like being around diversity, being around people that are like you is very important. And especially now when we talk about media and stuff, that representation of Asian in mainstream media is also important, because I think with more of that, it will allow for people to feel like you did with like, oh, having a buddy Jake.
Everyone needs a Jake.
And another point that you really made that I really thought was like, oh, really cool is like you mentioned when like your childhood, you growing up, you mentioned about like right away one of the main things was food, how you love the food that you had, the Asian food, the white food, all that stuff is really nice that you mentioned it, because it made me thinking like a lot of us, especially in like Asian diaspora, a lot of our touch points to our culture, to how we connect with our ancestors, to like our family is through food. And I feel like it's very often like not talked about enough that food is so important. We keep saying, oh, we love food and that, but we don't talk about the deeper like importance of it. I think it really binds us together. And hearing how you talk, I just feel like that's the first thing you think of when there's obviously so many other things you can touch on, like, oh, traditions and stuff. But like you picked food. So in terms of like your household, other than food, what other things kind of like stood out in terms of like your mom, especially in terms of talking to you, or educating you on like your Japanese side, because of course she can't really exactly like how should I put educate you on how to be Asian American or like being mixed race, right? So her thing would be like teaching you how she feels will be the Japanese that she needs to instill in you and all that stuff. So can you just talk about that? Sorry to interrupt the podcast, but if this is a podcast that is bigger, this would be the time where we would be selling an ad for either a pillow, a subscription box, or online therapy, but we're not there yet. However, if businesses want us to do an ad for them, we are more than happy to do so. Just reach out to us. In the meantime, this is our time to say that you, the listeners, mean a lot to us. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can do that by listening, commenting, liking, and subscribing to the podcast on all social media platforms, as well as giving us a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We are at What Kind of Asian Pod on Instagram, and just search What Kind of Asian Are You podcast for everything else. And if you have $1 or $2 to spare, buy me a coffee. Links in show notes. Now back to the episode.
Oh, definitely. So my mom was definitely a huge influence in my life. Both personality. I'm a lot like her in a lot of ways. More than I care to admit, I think. And my mom, in terms of language, we kind of had like a half Japanese, half English sort of language in our house. It was, it's like, oh, okay, let's talk about, it brings it back to food, right? So let's talk about dumplings, right? There are so many different types of dumplings. In Japanese it's gyoza. So it wasn't until I was a little bit older, in terms of my childhood, that I actually learned, oh, not everybody knows what the word gyoza is. And in my head, I think gyoza, I don't think dumpling. Does that make sense? And then it was very interesting. As I got older, and I figured out that, oh wow, my mom speaks two languages. She speaks Japanese. She taught herself English when she came here. She came to America not knowing a lick of English, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're like my hero. And um, you know, when I got older, I actually asked her, I was like, so mom, do you like translate in your head, or is it like, oh, okay, I'm having a conversation with somebody and I'm thinking in English, so I'm going to speak English? And she was like, no, like sometimes I actually think in Japanese, I have to translate it in my head, and then I say English, or vice versa. Um, because sometimes there isn't always like the like an English equivalent to Japanese words. I can't think of a specific example right now, but sometimes they don't always match up in that translation aspect of that. But my mom definitely had like a huge influence on my life, and one big thing that I did was dance. So I dabbled in a little bit of different types of dance, but as I was growing up, I actually did Irish step dancing for 15 years. um Total opposite, end of the world there. But I did non-competitive Irish step dancing for about 15 years, and I was committed to it. Every Saturday, 9 a.m., we would go to dance class. And, sometimes my mom, it would be like a 3-4 hour class. So, like, sometimes my mom would just drop me off and then come pick me up and everything. But she was such a huge support system. She loved it. And she loved being able to see me dance and everything. Same with my stepdad. They were both such amazing supporters of that aspect. But in terms of language and dance and food, I think it all sort of like ties together. Sort of like the experience, like the multiracial aspect of that. At least in terms of my childhood. Not sure about what other people have really sort of experienced in their own lives, but it definitely kind of made my childhood growing up very blended, which was really cool.
It's awesome, and hearing how you talk about like your overall experience, it seems like you did have like a time where you didn't know how to fit into like the white side or to the Asian side, but it feels as though like a lot of things that your family has done and also like the friends you had kind of made it not as difficult as it could have been. Because again, I don't think a lot of people can understand how difficult it would be being in the West, being an Asian diaspora, living in a place where it's all the people that are not like you entirely, even though you're
Right.
supposed to be like, oh, we're all the same because we're in America. Most of us would be American, so that should
Mhm.
bind us together. But unfortunately, it does not because we still look into the race and ethnic background and all that stuff. So, with all that being said, did you find that being mixed race or kind of just being multicultural, being where you are or where you grew up, led you to do certain things now, like with career and all that stuff, or it really didn't really have an impact at all?
Hmm. That's a good question, because at one point during my career, I was kind of like, well, I'm gonna go do my own thing. So it was it kind of just that's just sort of how my creative brain worked. I was like, I was kind of meant to do more than just be a worker bee. I never really fit into that worker bee, cookie cutter sort of 9 to 5 life. That was never for me. And eventually, I just sort of started my own business about 4 years ago as a side hustle to make a little bit more money, and being able to concentrate on my passions, and then eventually it led to full time, which was really great. I absolutely had a very fortunate childhood, and I know that it may not be the same for everybody. Um, that doesn't mean that I didn't experience any of the bad stuff, but I definitely do my best to be able to focus more on the positive aspect. And at one point in my life, I'm not sure when this was, but at one point I was just kind of like, well, you know what? Yes, I'm Japanese. Yes, I'm Irish, Italian. Apparently now I'm French, and all these sort of mix of different countries and cultures. And at one point, I was like, yeah, I'm a mixed race person, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just makes me unique, and I've always been someone to march to the beat of my own drum. So it's kind of just like an emphasis on that. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like, I'll just sort of keep doing my own thing. You know? So I did have some, like, sort of, I don't want to call them hardships, but because it sounds so, like, I don't know, like I'm being the victim, but I'm not trying to be. But like, for example, when I was in high school, teenagers are just mean. The end. And when I was in high school, sometimes I would have like an Asian lunch, or I love kimchi. Oh my god, I love kimchi so much. I actually had kimchi earlier for lunch today. So, but I going to a predominantly white school, sometimes I would bring home a home lunch, and it would have kimchi, or it would, be like a soba noodle, or not so much soup, because soup is just hard to travel in general. But some type of Asian dish, or something that wasn't of the typical American experience. And I would get a lot of people like sticking their nose in my dish, or my lunch, and being like, "What's that? Like, that looks gross." And it's kind of like, those things really hurt, and you really don't think about it, because I love food. Food is like my thing, hence no cilantro. But it just, food is something that I've really cared about, and in terms of food being sort of this bond that we really experience, especially in terms of different cultures and different races. It's something that people really take a lot of pride in. And what, my mom is a really great cook, and it was a delicious meal, and to have people sort of gawk at that because it's not pizza or a hamburger or a hot dog, it's like, it hurt. And it's those sort of tiny little things, microaggressions, that really sort of can, I don't want to say put someone over the edge, but it can really affect a person as they grow up, and a lot of people don't realize that. And I'm 30, um, and people still do that to this day. I like, so I live in Massachusetts, in the United States, and I think it's international. You've heard of H Mart, right? Yeah. Okay. So H Mart is international, I think. And so I had lunch earlier at H Mart today, and I was like, oh, these are my people. Like, I recognize all of these products, and no one judged me for ordering a big fat bowl of ramen and eating kimchi and using chopsticks, and it's like, like, I was totally like in my zone, and it was really great. So but yeah, when people stare at the food that someone worked so hard to create, it's like, really.
a teenager, a kid, and you don't know how to process that. You don't know how to like, don't want to say defend, but also just no words for it because people say these things. What are you supposed to do, right? Your parents or your family don't necessarily kind of teaches you how to deal with that
Mhm.
because they never experienced that themselves.
Right.
So when I think about like for our generation with our kids or whatever it may be, we are able to have that kind of mindset to be like, if it happens, you can do this, this, and this. But for us, we
Mhm.
never had that kind of training or like how to cope. And I think
Right.
hopefully future generation, even if they have to deal with these sorts of microaggressions that you mentioned, they know how to react and cope and like deal with it in a
Right.
positive manner so that it doesn't affect them. Even if it does affect them, they know how to like settle it in a healthy way. And you mentioned microaggression like when you were young. How about microaggressions now as an adult? How have you been dealing with it? In addition to, of course, not just being Asian, being
Mhm.
mixed, but also being a woman. Because I think all those kind of intersect in a weird way in terms of how microaggression uh, is applicable to you compared to me being Asian but male.
Mhm. Um, Interesting. So, being a little bit older, I've definitely learned a lot more, and I'm sort of a person. I feel like at 30, I'm just starting to like figure out life. So you're definitely not going to have it when you're 15 or when you're 12 and people are just being mean, because you haven't experienced life yet. So just starting to sort of figure out that aspect of it. It does still happen to this day. And actually fairly recently, I want to say last year probably, I was working with a potential client, and this it was like a therapeutics company, not so much in the biotech sense, but more of like the therapist, licensed social worker type of sense. And they were very much about, BIPOC and being diverse and inclusive, LGBTQIA plus, especially where one of their staff that we would talk to was, he was an older gentleman. He was white, and he was also gay. Now I don't really like judge anyone based on anything like that, um, because I myself am bisexual, so and I'm very open about it. It's not something that bothers me or something that I care to sort of make the main topic, if that makes sense. But at one point, we were having a conversation, and they were saying that a lot of their branding was just blue. That's just how it is. And they were saying that one of the images were there was not enough, black people in it, or people of color, and then it kind of went on and on. And at one point, this older gentleman who, we'll call him John, at one point John was just like, we don't want to see biracial light-skinned people in our images. And I was just kind of like, save face. Like, don't yell. And initially, I did want to say something and be like, hi. I'm here on the Zoom call, like, I'm mixed race, right? um but being the professional that I am, I kind of just was it wasn't really my client. It was through a company that I assist. So I kind of just kept my composure, poker face, which I think a lot of people are expecting in that aspect. But as soon as I got off that call, I was just like, I went and I grabbed a pillow and I screamed into my pillow, and I went on this whole rant about like so racist and hypocritical, and it was just ridiculous. But in with that experience, it's like, being a business owner, um it kind of became one of my non-negotiables. So whenever I bring on a new client myself, um you know, there are certain red flags that I sort of look for, and then green flags that I want in an ideal client. So it was sort of a learning experience in that sense. Um, but it was definitely really messed up.
Oh, that's crazy. And I
Yeah.
really like how you like mentioned now that, your kind of experience with it. Now you learn and you now have like a set kind of red flag, green flags, and
Mhm.
essentially boundaries that you created so that you feel safe, you feel respected, you are okay with. And I think as Asian diaspora, we need to do more and more of that, establish boundaries. Because if all the things that have happened in the last 3 years or so and still continuing, I think we really need to set clear boundaries because it's been so long that we've been just like, oh, we just got to take a safe face, not cause any more issues. But, it affects us. And obviously, it matters enough that you still bring it up because it really is not a cool thing at all. It hurts. And I think,
Yes.
yeah, the boundary thing, I really love what you're doing. And, you know, hopefully, if we establish boundaries and then in addition to that, educate, it could lead to something more positive, something more where they learn and learn to respect. I think at the end of the day,
Mhm.
they could be whatever they could be, but as long as you do your part, even if they are racist or whatever, at least you can say I did my part rather than be like I'm a bystander or I didn't do anything to protect myself and my community. I think a lot of times now we have to look beyond the well, me not doing anything, in fact, kind of help me myself. But then if you don't do anything, it could end up affecting your whole community that you care about. Like if
Oh,
you being
absolutely.
like complacent or like passive and not be silent about it, it could be like where they think it's okay to treat others in our community the same way, and you don't want that, right? So it's one of the things, boundaries are just really important. And thank you for sharing that story. It
Oh,
must be really
absolutely.
tough to be like professional and like be not like actually I have something to say, and
Right.
but
Well,
yeah.
complacent is definitely not a word that describes me ever. So eventually, with that particular situation, because it wasn't exactly my client, it was a project that I was working on. I went to the project manager, whoever responsible decision maker, and I was like, "Hey." This big thing happened, and this is how I feel about it, and I would really appreciate it if when you do break up with this client, which they did, thank gosh, um bring up that aspect of it, because they claim to be a company that really embraces diversity and inclusion of everyone, um but they're not. And this recorded conversation was a prime example of that. So, I'd really appreciate that. And um, it it was, I had my words about it. That's for sure. So yeah, it was definitely experience, and it's something that I experienced today. And um it's at some point, I kind of just decided that I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna put up with this. This is not cool. Like, calling me a mutt is not okay, or saying that you want, you don't want to see biracial whitewashed images. um or you don't want to see like biracial people in your images, or have them be whitewashed. Having them not be whitewashed is great, but the biracial aspect of it was kind of threw me off. um you know, being able to, um, I'm just trying to think of the words to say. So I'm not quiet about it. That's for sure. There are instances where you pick and choose battles. I'm learning as I get older. Um, and there are some people out there that are just going to pick a fight, add fuel to the fire, and then walk away and watch the drama unfold. And those are not my people. I do my very best to be able to surround myself with people who love me and accept me and, um, let me be me. And, again, recognizing the boundaries and what exactly I want in my life. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not being selfish. It's being able to protect myself as a multiracial person.
Definitely. And we talk a lot about like your experience being mixed race, mixed cultural identity, and all that. And let's talk about another facet of your life, which is being an entrepreneur, having your own business in terms of like web design and like content and all that stuff. But now, from how I became aware of you and your project, is through doing a magazine,
Mhm.
a publication. Can you just talk about what is that magazine? Why did you do it? What is the magazine about? And the journey of creating a magazine in 2022 when a lot of people would say, "Oh, print is dead," no, online blogs are the way to go, or like social media and all that stuff. And you being someone who very familiar with the internet, why did you decide to take on this project?
Well, I went to college for journalism and writing. So that's creative writing as well as technical writing. And when I did work for a giant corporate company, um, my opinion really wasn't allowed. And I had to be the worker bee and fall in line. And I met one of my best friends there. So it was definitely a good experience in that sense. um but I just I had to put up and shut up, so, and just do my work, keep my head down, and eventually a promotion will come when you're quiet enough, and that's how it kind of always was in that sense. But with journalism, um, I was always taught to question everything, and so I definitely didn't fit into that aspect. So I went to school for journalism. My internship for my senior year was actually, um, being able to create a magazine, as if it were a part of the school, which was really, really cool. It was for student affairs, being able to talk about like enticing topics in that sense. And I graduated and all that fun stuff, went to work. And then I've always sort of wanted to create a magazine. Um, I I don't think, journalism is dead or news is dead or anything like that. Maybe print, not so much. I'm definitely a little bit old school when it comes to, I want to hold a magazine in my hands, and like, ugh, everyone's gonna think I'm so weird for this, but I don't even care. So when I worked for the school student newspaper, we would print weekly, and then there'd be a fresh stack every Friday morning, and then you get to sniff it. And that was the best part. It's just, the smell of and holding a fresh print newspaper that you created in your hands. It was such an exhilarating experience. So I wanted to experience that again. Print is garbagely expensive right now. So as of right now, No Cilantro Please Magazine is digital only, with the hopes of turning into print. Um, print is expensive, but again, there are some people who, they want to get away from their computer screen, says the web designer. And they want to be able to, when they sit on the toilet, they want to grab a magazine from whatever basket there may be and have some reading material, or just turn off the work brain, which is actually one of our articles, and be able to sit on the couch, turn off the TV, put the phone away, turn off the laptop or the computer, sit and read and hold something. I personally love books, so I definitely like to dive into a good book, and being able to lose myself in that world. So eventually we'll go to print, but for now, a lot of people really sort of they use their phone or sit on the couch and then they scroll through their phone, scroll through Instagram, all that fun stuff. So with the magazine, you can actually still do that. So it is responsive and mobile friendly. So you're able to scroll through your phone and be able to read it on your phone, your tablet, or on your desktop. So yeah, eventually we'll go to print one day, hopefully. And it's really all about featuring these small businesses around the globe and being able to highlight them.
And you mentioned like, oh, small businesses. That's what like the topic revolving around the magazine is. And can you just talk more about like why you decided to talk about small businesses, or like just the content that is in the magazine? Why that you lean towards uh, reporting about that, and just your overall thoughts on the journey so far? And like it must be fun, a lot of work, and what has been the biggest kind of takeaway? Because this is like a pretty big project, I must say, because you have a team that works with you and going through this, and like you mentioned, it's expensive to print.
Yep.
So you're doing it digital right now, but even then, that still will incur costs and whatnot. So can you just talk about that overall journey to publish the magazine? Because not a lot of people are doing it like that anymore.
Oh, absolutely. So I definitely could not have done this without my co-founder and co-editor, and she designed the entire thing. Allison, she is like sent from above or something and appeared in my life, and it was like it was meant to be. You just click and you just know. So doing that together, if I had done it by myself, it would have taken me probably 5 more years to be able to do it. And Allison really, took my ideas and implemented them. And, she shared her thoughts too, in terms of, marketing, social media. She was recently editor in chief of 2 newspapers in the local area. So being able to bring her recent experience from that as well, really sort of it tied it together in like a pretty little bow. And it's been amazing. I honestly could not have done it without her. She was just an absolute joy. Um, in terms of the journey of creating it, I've actually never really had that question before. So being able to create it, it was a lot of brain work. So she designed the whole thing, and I would pitch some ideas to her as well, or some suggestions. But mostly it was her in terms of the design aspect, and we really wanted to identify who this was for. And we sort of have a twofold audience in that aspect, where we have the cult following, sort of, the person who loves small businesses will support local, that type of audience. And then we have the small businesses themselves, and being able to identify our audience, to identify, where do we want this to be. the type of branding that was, kind of the first step. I went to Creativa out in New Zealand, and my friend Maribel, she did an amazing job with the avocado, which is super recognizable, and I love the colors and the font and everything. It just sort of like brought it all together. So the branding aspect was, kind of the first step, and then being able to market it in terms of launch, pre-launch, post-launch, not in that order, and being able to send out the assignments, find writers, and Allison actually came with the idea of finding a call for Twitter, call for writers on Twitter. So that was really cool. We got a ton of responses, and we're still getting responses, which is absolutely amazing. And, just being able to bring our creative minds together to really sort of, okay, what's going to work to be able to, for the next 3-4 months, to be able to, bring this to fruition. And then it happened. It just kind of happened. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's out. We made a magazine. This is amazing. So yeah, the journey has been, it's been a lot of work, a lot of dedication, a lot of money, but it's been absolutely worth it for the first issue. And I look forward to being able to put more issues together. We are quarterly, so it's every 3 months. So I'm still looking forward to issue 2. We'll see how that goes, and definitely refining the processes and everything, make it a little bit easier for all of us.
That's great, and what a journey. And talking about, oh, the first issue is out. Can you just talk a little bit of what people can expect if they do purchase the magazine issue 1 online to read? Like, what can they gain from it? What highlight some articles maybe you wrote or that you really like in the issue? And what's the plan ahead in terms of content for the magazine in future issues? Is it going to be exactly the same, or how would you want to form it?
Yes, so definitely it would focus a lot on the small business, entrepreneur, freelancer type of aspect of it, and being able to highlight them. It's really all about them. It's not about me. It's not about Allison. It's not about anybody on the team. It's about those small businesses being able to have their spotlight. And ones that I wrote, I'm trying to think what I wrote. It was all kind of a blur, but now I'm like, okay, what did I actually go and do before?
One of them was, if I can remind you, one of them was doing a feature on Jeanette.
Yes, oh, I love Jeanette. She was awesome. Poor thing, it was 2 p.m. our time, I think, around that time, 2-3 o'clock, and it was like 6 a.m. in Australia, and I was like, girl, you're nuts. But yeah, so talking with Jeanette, Jeanette Ta from Walk and Kin. You can find her on Instagram. She was actually a previous guest on the What Kind of Asian podcast. And speaking of multiracial, she is Chinese and Vietnamese, so we did a feature on her, the multicultural aspect, being able to pull from both aspects of her Asian identity, and everything that she's learned from her family and from her grandma, and being able to share those recipes with the world. So I wrote that feature. She was such a blast to interview. She's just such a sweet person, and she's just wonderful. Like, everybody needs to check her out. Like, I actually I made a reel. It's on our Instagram. I made a reel, and it was trying out her Vietnamese ginger chicken wings. Oh gosh, it was so good. So good. You have to try it out. She has a free ebook on her website, and then you can download it. And I followed the recipe, and it just came out amazing. And I just, oh gosh, it's now a staple in our household. So thank you, Jeanette, for that one. Other articles there's like breaking the 9 to 5, this 9 to 5 culture that, our society has and is trying to, get away from. It's an antiquated model that really doesn't work for today's society anymore. So being able to talk about that and, going out on your own. Another one was, I think I had mentioned this earlier, turning off your work brain when you work from home. My bedroom is 6 feet that way, right past that wall. And it is very tempting sometimes to go back to bed or take a nap or, hang out on the couch in the living room. And, you know, it's so easy to be able to take my laptop, bring it to the couch, and work from the couch and then have the TV on in the background. But are you really turning off your work brain in that aspect? Probably not. You're actually doing work with some noise in the background. You just have to be in a really comfortable spot. So, being able to talk about things. There is, of course, we talked earlier about supporting Ukraine through small businesses. Allison wrote that, such a beautiful article. Our cover art is actually by Julia Krasnick. I apologize if I butchered her last name, but she is a digital artist. Where we used her illustrations for the cover page to be able to, highlight that aspect and support her by purchasing digital prints off of Etsy, actually, and being able to, without having to ship a physical product and still being able to support a Ukrainian small business owner. What else is there? The different features. We have Peter Shankman, who is the host and creator of the Faster Than Normal podcast. Definitely talks about neurodiversity, inclusion, diversity in general, and being able to recognize that ADHD and other neurodiverse aspects are other gifts, and they're not curses. So being able to interview in that aspect and being able to utilize that gift. We have one of my favorite restaurants, which is called Good Earth Holistic Kitchen. That's sort of local to me. And they have delicious food. It's just, I'm there like every other day, honestly. They're so good. Their smoothies are delicious, everything. We have another local area to us that Allison wrote about a custom art framing. And there is someone, her husband is, he runs a supper club where they meet occasionally and they, bond over food. And a whole bunch of different features. There's one from a new company called Good Feels Cannabis, and they have beverage enhancers, and being able to create a brand new product and manufacture a product. They just became they just launched their product mid-March, I believe. So we wrote a feature on them. What else did we feature? Hold on one sec. I have it up over here. We also have, a tamales place in Arizona. There is a web designer coach, or freelancer coach. His name is Troy Dean. He is the CEO of Agency Mavericks, and they're based out of Australia, but they have international outreach. And finding the right coach for you, because coaches are everywhere, right? So how do you know when you're ready for a coach? How to find the right coach for you, and things to be able to talk about in that sort of aspect. I think I got everybody. But there are definitely a lot more interesting articles. There's small business tools that you can use for, starting up a business. And eventually, we'd like to really be able to create sort of a welcoming community. that is inclusive for everybody and actually inclusive for everybody, especially, entrepreneurs, freelancers, small business owners that are really, either starting out, they're right in the middle of it, or they're ready to like let go of their business and hand it off to somebody else. And be sort of like a resource hub. Because when I started my business about 4 years ago, it's actually 5 in August. Oh my gosh. Who would have thought? But when I started my business 4.5 years ago, I slapped some money on the table of town hall, and I was like, I'm going to start a business. And then I walked out and I was like, okay, now what? Right? So I sort of did everything backwards. And so I want to be able to provide that sort of resource for other people who are in that same mindset of breaking the 9 to 5 or starting their own business, especially, during this type of pandemic. There's definitely an uptick of businesses. So, so our first issue just released on April 1st. We're super excited. We tripled our sales goal, which was amazing, and I'm super excited about that. And it can only go up from here.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the magazine first issue. A lot of good content in there. It got a bit of everything that allows you to learn from the tools you provided, and then feel inspired from those entrepreneurs that are doing their thing, doing so successfully, and also just spotlighting small business owner that needs to shine, that deserve to be seen, heard, and all that stuff. And I think it allows for people to read it and find out like what works and what doesn't to help them in their journey of entrepreneurship, freelancing, creativity, business like creating and all that stuff. And I think it got to keep going. Looking forward to future issues, and like you said, it can only go up from now and from here. And with that said, thank you so much for talking to me, talking about the magazine, sharing your perspective. And that's it for all the questions. Again, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about your life, your background, your story, your project, No Cilantro Please Magazine. Definitely check that out. And where can they find you if they want to find you and your project? Can you just plug all the stuff that you need to plug so that they can find it once you finish listening to this episode?
So, our website is nocilantroplease.com. We are on all the meta, Facebook, Instagram. Mostly we're on Instagram. We're on Twitter as well. I am on Facebook and Instagram, and then I also have Fanbase, which is a not meta-owned company, which is really wonderful. They are actually a Black-owned social media company that's very similar to Instagram. You should definitely check them out. They're really cool. Also check us out. So we are, for Facebook and Instagram, we are at NCP Magazine, and then for Twitter, we are No Cilantro Mag. And then me personally, I am Tinydragon, because everybody knows me as Tinydragon.
Perfect. Again, thank you so much, and best of luck with your magazine. I hope to see it in print soon, and all the best to you. And for everyone listening, thank you for listening again. And tune in next time for another episode of What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. And till next time, bye bye. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and share the podcast on your social media, and rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can find us by just searching What Kind of Asian Are You podcast on Google, and at What Kind of Asian Pod on Instagram. For the YouTube listeners, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and ring the notification bell. Last but not least, buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/whatkindofasian. Thank you again, and make sure to tune in next time for another awesome episode.